Hey everyone, Synthetic Future here, and today we're doing a little video about a patch I posted in the Zoia users group, and well, someone wanted to know how it worked, so here we are. This patch, it's going to be a rather long video, I'm going to say, because we're going to go through a lot of theory before we get into sounds, and it's a little bit of a complicated little thing. So I'm first going to explain what the patch does, and if you want to know how it works, you can just ride along. And I will also post a schematic of this patch, so if you're savvy enough and you think I can figure it out myself, definitely just follow the schematic. So first let's take a little look at what this thing does. So the idea here is to put as many kind of preset sounds into a single patch. The idea being that if you were to take Zoia onto a stage, it might be tricky to switch between patches because the display isn't all that big, and if you're in a hurry, it's very easy to miss a preset and get a wrong sound and stuff like that. So I was thinking, how could we make this a little bit more robust? And my idea was to put a bunch of sounds into a single patch, so you could potentially just keep everything in one patch. Of course, this would potentially drive up the CPU cost, so we need to do this a little bit efficient. The way I've set it up is it has 6 sounds going on right now in a single patch. Every switch has 2 sounds, so sound 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. And you can see on the bottom indicators which sound is active. So let's go through a quick little demo, and then we will erase everything and build everything back up and talk a little bit about how to approach a problem like this. So here is our first little sound thingy. Just a bit of distortion. Press the button again. We move to sound number 2. We get a distortion with a reverb. We can move on to sound number 3. We get a bunch of delay. Sound number 4. There's a good chance that the guitar isn't actually tuned. It is what it is. Sound number 5. Here we have a combination of distortion and delay, and I think there's also some chorus in there. And we move on to sound number 6. Which is just dry. And that's the basic idea behind this patch. So we have different sounds on all the buttons. So this gives you quite a bit of flexibility within a single patch. So you never have to do like double switch combos to get into anything, which I think is pretty neat. So let's start way at the start of doing a project like this. The first thing you need to do is write down a few design parameters. So a few things you want to meet. So my design parameters here is we want to have 6 modes with 3 switches. We want to have exclusive switching, meaning that if I activate one of the switches, the other switches deactivate. I actually made a video about that, but we will recap it in this video. You also want to have the behavior, at least I think, that whenever you switch to one of the settings, you switch to the first of those settings. So let's say we're at setting 2, and we move to setting 5, and we go back here. It will go to setting 1. It doesn't go back to setting 2, it goes back to setting 1. And I think that's more predictable, because if you're playing in setting 5 and you're like, I need 2, you just step 1 twice and you're in setting 2, instead of having to remember, oh, where are the settings? So that's important. And I also wanted to make it so that I can actually bypass the distortion, because a distortion on Zoia doesn't have a wet dry. We need to make a little bypass for that. That's our design parameters, and now we get into the boring talky bit. So let me put away the guitar and let's talk. Okay, so let's get a clean patch and let's start there. Now I'm going to preemptively say the camera might be a tad bit fuzzy. That's because the bitrate of this capture card is kind of crap. So it's not the sharpest thing, so hopefully it's easy enough to follow along. Let's get into an empty patch, and I have a little patch here called YouTube. Convenience. Now we're going to break down this entire process into multiple steps, and in the end we will have one more complex patch, and we will kind of divide stuff over pages. The nice thing with Zoia is you can always rearrange things when they are not where you want them to be, so that's the cool thing. Now we are going to preserve our first page for the actual effects. So we're going to leave this clean, and we're just going to move into page number 2. We're going to start off with exclusive switching, because that's the first thing we need to solve here. So we need to set up some stomp switches, and we're actually going to set up a left stomp switch. We are going to set up a middle stomp switch, and we're going to set up a right stomp switch. Now I'm purposefully leaving a little bit of space between them, because now the foot switches kind of correspond with where they are on the pedal. It's important to set off these two momentary switches, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So now if we press and hold one of the switches, one of the lights goes up. This means it works. That's awesome. Great. Step 1, arranged. Let's move on to the second part of this little puzzle. Now we want these switches to be exclusive. That's why we use monetary switches, because if we use latching switches, if I were to press this one, it would go on, but it wouldn't deactivate if I pressed the next one. We are actually going to build a little thing to get this to work. So what we need for this is actually a control module. If we go into the control module, we have a let's see, and that's a in switch is what we're going to use. We are going to use 3 inputs, and we'll get to why we use 3 inputs later. 3 inputs, and we are going to save this. So this is our input switch, 3 inputs, a channel select, and an output. Now for this part of the demo I will just dial them to be 0.1, 0.2 and 0.3-ish. It's not exact, but it's exact enough that you can see which of the foot switches is pressed. And now we will make this react to the switches. So for this we need to connect up the channel select. Now how this actually works, the channel select is fairly easy. The channel select, the amount of channels you have is basically 1 volt divided by however many channels. So our first channel is on 0 to 0.33 volts. Then we have 0.34 to 0.66, and then we have 0.67 to 1 volt. That's our third channel. So let's make this foot switch our first channel. So we just bind it to the channel select, and we are going to dial it way down. Now I like to stay away from actual 0 due to rounding errors and stuff, so we'll just leave it at 2, which is comfortably above 0 and definitely below 0.33. So this is good. We will connect to the second switch, and we will dial this to something like 3.6. That's above 0.34, so it should be good. And then we connect the last one, and this will just be slightly below 100, so this is fine. So what happens now is if I press one of the switches, I have the output selected. If I press this one, the output will be 0.1. If I press this one, it will be 0.2. And if I press this one, it will be 0.3. So we now have effectively an output selector. And this will be useful at a later point. But as you can see, the second I let go, it bounces back to channel 1. This is the default behavior for one of the input switchers. When nothing is sent, it will actually bounce back to 1. And that's no good. We need it to hold the value while the button is pressed. And if you want to hold things, you end up using a sample and hold. So let's go for a sample and hold, which should be in here as well. Sample and hold. And we're going to say, okay, sample and hold works fairly easily. Sample and hold just takes whatever you put in, and when you trigger, it will hold the outcome. So what we are going to hold is actually the value that is outputted by this switcher. So you are going to tie this together. Then we need to send a trigger to this actual thing, which is going to be all of the buttons. So we're just going to bind this, this, and this. And now we have an output. Now if I press this button, it will hold at 0.1. And we have a little bit of a problem here. Okay, so what is going on here? Why doesn't this work? This is actually because every module in Zoia has a little bit of latency. So when I press this button, it will trigger before the signal goes through this selector. So when I press this, it will do this, but it will have sampled before that happens. So we need to add a little bit of delay in that trigger to make this line up. So we need a really short delay. I think it works with the CV delay as well. Let's try the CV delay. It should work. I think I used the CV delay in the previous patch as well. So let's decouple all the connections we just made. Let's send all of these into the delay. Set the delay as short as it will go, and let this trigger. And now you see it holds the last value. So we can actually see which button is pressed. If we press 2, 0.2, 0.1, 0.3, 0.1, 0.2. And we've now made an exclusive switch, because we know which switch is pressed, and it will simply hold that value for as long as it needs, actually, until you reset the patch. So we can tick off our exclusive switching, and we can work on the next part. The next part is a little bit trickier. How do we turn 3 knobs into 2 knobs? All right, let's make a new page. We'll tie things together later on. So if we want to do multiples with a single thing, we need a sequencer. So let's go into our sequencers, and we should have a CV sequencer somewhere. Every switch will have 2 steps. So we need 2 steps. And we're just going to leave it for here right now. Let's do done. And before we connect anything, let's actually make 3 copies. 1 here, and 1 here, because we have 3 switches. We want to have 3 steps, obviously. Cool. We will set these to CV. And just so we can once again understand what is going on, we will set this one to 0.1 and this one to 0.2-ish. 1, 2. It's the one thing I don't like too much about the Zoia is it's kind of hard to accurately dial things in a single movement. It's always a little bit of a fiddle. But there we go. 0.1, 0.2. All right, step sequencers. Very simple. If you send a pulse to the step sequencer, it will advance 1 step. Kind of obvious. Now, just because I want to keep the moving from page to page to a minimum, I will actually move all the foot switches to the other page, just so it's a little bit easier to keep track of things. So let's move this module here. It's so nice that you can actually do this. There we go. And the best part is it still keeps all the connections to the other page as well. There we go. So we have our foot switches back. All right. Foot switch number 1 controls this sequencer. Foot switch number 2 controls this sequencer. Foot switch number 3 controls this sequencer. Cool. It's a 0.1. We press it, 0.2, 0.1, 0.2. Same for foot switch 2, 0.1, 0.2, 0.1, 0.2. And number 3, 0.1, 0.2. Very convenient. There's just one tiny little problem here. Right now, the first switch is set to 0.2. And if I press the other switch, the first switch is still at 0.2. And this is one of the rules I declared earlier on. I always want to start at the first sequence. So how do we fix this? Because clearly we made a little mistake here. Fairly easy. If you edit the step sequencer, there's actually a little setting here that's called restart check. Simply turn it on. Done. Do the same here. Done. And we do the same here. Restart check on. Done. We get this new little jack here. Input. Whatever you want to call it. Now, for our first sequencer, the second and third switch need to reset it. So we tie this and this. For the second sequencer, our first and our third need to be reset. And for the third, the first and the second need to be reset. So what happens now is if this is at 2 and I press any of the switches, nothing happens, which is a little bit odd. But if you switch again, it skips to 1. Now if I press this button again, 2, and I press 1, it stays on 1. And that's the important thing. It doesn't go to 2 anymore. The reason why it doesn't instantly switch to 1 when it receives a reset is that it doesn't reset until it receives a trigger. In our specific use case, this is very convenient. So we're just going to leave it at this right now. So what we've done now is we've satisfied one more condition. And this is the condition, always start at the first preset in a row, because if we have it at 1, we press the second switch, it's at 0.1, now it's at 0.2. If we press 1 again, it's still at 0.1. So it's back to the start. If we press this one, it goes to 0.1, which is the start. So we've already met 2 conditions of our little project, which is awesome. Now we get into the slightly more fiddly third part of our project. And this is we want to take 3 switches and turn it into 6 modes. Now we already turned 3 switches into 6 modes. It's just that they are not working together at this moment. So how do we manage this? All right. Let's go to our first page. Our very first page. Empty page. Love it. Just to make it a little bit stylistically easy to see at which page we are, I'm going to input the audio input. It's going to be a mono patch. And I'm going to put an audio output. Also mono. So now we have a nice reference point and we know this is page 1, page 2, page 3. You can name them, but that's for when you publish things. If you're just messing with things, there's not really a reason to name things. All right, let's start tying things together. Let's get this ball rolling. So the first thing we need is another CV switch. Now, what we want here is a output switch. So we take a control CV output switch. Out switch, cool. And we want this to have 6 channels, which will nicely fill up the bottom row. Cool. And we are going to save this. Go. The thing this row will output is always 1. So we're just going to dial it up all the way to 1. We will see 1 will now light up because 1 is selected. If we change this specific value, you will see that the block that lights up moves. This will be our control voltage. So this is the control voltage for our first preset, second preset, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. And our goal is to make this move when we press the buttons. So we need to do a little bit of magic here, because just this is not going to cut it. We need to send a CV here, and these CV will depend on whichever switch is pressed, and if it's the first or the second time we press the switch. Thankfully, we already made something for this. Well, mostly. So we can move back to page 3. All right. And we are going to set up these sequencers to correspond with the steps of the big output step we have now on the first page. This is 6 steps, so a single step is 1 volt divided by 6 steps, which should give us 0.16, which I will just quickly double check. 1 volt divided by 6 steps, yeah, 0.16. So our first step is 0 to 0.16, so this is already correct. Our second step will be 0.16 times 2 is 0.3. 3, so let's make that 3.5 just to be on the safe side. This is channel 1, channel 2. Channel 3 will be 0.16 times 3, 0.84. 48. This is weird thing with Dutch numerals and English numerals, which are inverted for some odd reason. So it's always a little bit puzzling to get the right one. 0.16 times 4 is 0.64. So let's move this to 69. That should be plenty clear. 0.16 times 5. This should be 0.8. But let's slightly overshoot it. And our last channel, 0.16 times 6 is 0.96. So let's just crank this all the way to... There we go. That's good. All right. So this is channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, channel 5, channel 6. The only problem is these two go to this output, these two go to this output, these go to this output. So we need some way to take 3 outputs and turn them into a single output. And thankfully there's a good solution for this, and that's called the input switcher. So let's take our little friend input switcher. Number of inputs 3. Save. Input 1, 2, and 3. So let's connect 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3. Now we can actually double check. 0.1, pressed again, 0.35, 0.5, pressed again, 9.6, 8.3, 9.8. Excellent. And the output should change accordingly. So if I press this one, it's 0.1. And actually the other ones don't work yet because it doesn't switch. So now we need to combine another element from our patch, which we already made. We need to know which switch was pressed. And we actually built that. That's this thing. We don't want this. I think, at least. This determines which position is switched. So we need to take one CV and divide it into 3 again. So this one is all right. This one should be above 0.33. This one should be above 0.66. And now we output 3 channels worth of CV. And this needs to be connected to... Oh, I messed up. Our channel select here. And now if we press a button, you go to 0.5, 9.6, 1, 3.5, and we get this switching behavior. We can now tie this output to the very first page, the channel select, which should be this one. Yep. And now if we press the button, we can move around. But we've messed up, because we actually go from 1 to 5. So I've made a mistake in one of the parameters. So let's actually fix that. I wonder what the mistake is. This should be 0.16 times 2, 0.32. Oh, it should be below 0.32. Oh, there we go. This should be all right. Let's double check that. 1, 2. All right. This one switches to 4 and 5, so I've made another mistake. So let's try to reason our logic again. So 0.16 times 3 is 0.84, so it should be below 84. I've put everything above the value it should be. I think that's the issue here. That's what happens when you try to speed these things. This should be below 0.64, so it should be something like this. This is going to be similar, 0.16 times 5 is below 0.8. There-ish. And that's probably fine. All right, let's try again, shall we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6. And we can press these switches in any order, and it will move the signal around. And that's basically how we get. There we go. It's a little bit brighter now. 1, 2, 3. Or actually, 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6. That's the correct order. And now we can start using these CVs, because we can now switch between things. How do we set this up? So let's first tick off our list, because we have achieved 3 switches controlling 6 modes. Check mark. There we go. Let's start off with the easy stuff, because we like easy stuff. Easy stuff is good. Let's put in a effect. And we are going to take a delay with modulation, and we are going to say yay, and we are going to input our guitar signal into it and output our guitar signal out of it. Excellent. Excellent. Dial the mix all the way down, because we are going to modulate it up with these settings, so we need to be at the lowest setting. Let's actually dial this all the way down as well. Right around there. Cool. Just going to dial down the modulation a little bit, because I hate high modulation. Here we go. Good. Good. Our first preset, let's say the mix should be 20. Cool. Our second preset, let's say our mix is 50. Our third preset, let's say our mix is 100%. Excellent. Guitar time. So we're right now at setting 1. Let's move to setting 2. Setting 2. Setting 1. 2. 3. Cool. We can also tie other parameters, obviously, so we can say setting 1 is this delay time, that's fine. We are going to take setting 2, and we are going to change the delay time up a fair bit. Let's go there. And setting 3, we go for a super long delay time, something like this. Cool. Let's have a quick listen again. So setting 1, 2, actually I need to dial setting 3 down just a little bit, because right now at 100% you can't actually hear the original stroke, so you're not going to hear that there's a little delay, so let's put it at 90. And if we press the switches, you will see changes. 295, 1 second, 2 seconds. 0.2, 0.39, and 50%. And this is how you can tie up any parameter. And the nice thing is you only need one effect, so it's actually very CPU efficient. Now you need to keep in mind that because we're using only one effect, if you were to switch while the thing is running, you will get some interesting modulations. That's just the price you pay for being very CPU efficient, I guess. It's also fun. You can, of course, play around with that. And the same works with reverb. You can tie as many parameters to one of these CVs if you want to, because, well, there's not really a limit to this. Now, the trick I did on the first patch is that I simply placed everything in the order I wanted it, and I can just use the mix to turn things on and off. The nice thing with using mix is that the signal will still go through the delay line, so when you go to a patch with delay, you will get a little bit of spillover from the previous thing you played because it's still in the delay line. I kind of like that. It's not to everyone's taste. Same goes for reverb. If you tie it up this way, if you activate reverb, you already played something, the tails will be in the reverb line, so you will hear that. It's a limitation. It's also something I kind of like. So it's personal flavor. You can work around that if you want to. Anyways, that's design goal number 3. Now there's just one little thing that's still bothering us, and that little thing is called the wonderful little overdrive. So let's quickly take out this connection. Oh, yep, cool. And let's toss in a overdrive distortion. Done. Input, output. Now, the one thing you might notice about the overdrive is that it doesn't have a mix. It has a very annoying output gain control. But it doesn't have a mix control. And this is the last thing I want to quickly cover, which isn't entirely related to this concept, but I think it's still kind of fun to show. So how do we bypass an effect? Now, what we need to do to bypass effects is make sure the signal never reaches this effect. It simply needs to move past this effect. So we need to put something in front which can switch the input, which is obviously a switcher. So we are going to take the connections out, this connection out, this connection out. Now, what I've done with my other patches, I've actually placed this on the second page. Just for demonstration's sake, I will build it here so you can see it. We are going to need an audio module because we're using the audio domain. We have a single input. So we go to the audio switcher. It's really hard to read on the screen. Very sorry for that. I hope it's followable enough. Audio input switch, audio output switch. That's what we want. We want the audio output switch to have 2 channels. And we're going to place it down. So we now have an input, which is going to be connected to the input. We have an output 1 and an output 2. I'm going to connect output 2 to the distortion, output 1 to the delay. Actually, I messed something up here. I think I've messed something up. Oh no, it's all right. Output 2 is connected to the distortion, output 1 is connected to the delay. And now this setting controls whether or not the audio goes through the distortion. So at channel 1 it shouldn't, and at channel 2, need to connect it up, of course. Cool. The nice thing is, because this is a 0-1 switch, so at 0 volts it goes to our default 1, and at 1 volt it goes to 2. We can simply tie this up to any of our CV outputs. So if we want distortion on our first sound, we simply tie this to the switch. And this should set the switch to channel 2. Now for distortion, if we press the switch again, we will not have distortion, because the signal goes straight from here to there. Go back to the first preset. And there you go. Quite a bit of theory here. Of course, you can, once you've set everything up, move it around to make it a little bit more space efficient. Move these to the same place. Move this down here and move these. And you can squash everything into one single place to make a little bit of extra room. Or not, you have plenty of pages anyways. And you can start filling this out with the effects you want and tying everything up to the CVs to make little presets, which you can easily switch between with these three buttons. Right now, with this setup, we're running at 30% CPU, and that's mostly because we have a distortion and a modulation here. If we're just looking at the usage from the logic, it's actually 4%. So that's super low. Very efficient way. It has some small flaws, like the spillover from the delay. I think that's a feature, not a flaw, but whatever. If there are any questions, because this was a fast-talking, fast-moving, high-octane, super-duper active thing, leave them down below, or rewatch the video and pause a little bit. Should be able to figure it out. Anywho, that's it for you today. I'm going to have a lot of fun editing this down to an even shorter video, and I'm going to wish you a great day. See ya.